Hello, and welcome to another episode of Do What You Love, where we talk all things how to live a more creative and fulfilling life. And I am so excited because today I have one of my dear friends, Jen Rose. She is a holistic life and wellness coach. And we're going to get into all the things on how to live a more meaningful life. She's had really an incredible journey that I'm excited to talk about. So if you're in a state of transition, if you're in a state of, I don't know what my next move is going to be, then this is absolutely an episode that is for you because Jen just went through an incredibly transformative transition, and I'm excited to chat with her all about it. So, Jen, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Kate, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to see you and be here. And I'm excited about what we're going to get into because we always get into really amazing conversation and
Yes.
juicy.
This is like a long time coming too, because we've talked about doing this for, oh my gosh, it's been months, maybe even a year. I don't know. Time is just, I don't even know where it goes. But I'm excited to finally chat with you because we used to chat a lot more than we do now, and you are someone who I just so adore and appreciate, and it's just like I just love that even though we haven't spoken, I still feel like I know that I can always call you and we can always have it's almost like those friends that you can just pick up wherever you left off and feels like no time has gone by, and we need those people in our lives. So one of the reasons why I think, we met on Clubhouse. So I think during the pandemic, so we were kind of like forced to just like always be on our phones and on Zoom and talking to all these people. And then when life opened back up, obviously it transitioned some people into getting back out and doing things in person. But you have had such an interesting journey over the past couple of months or really this year. So before we kind of dig into your journey of kind of moving and figuring out your career and all that kind of stuff, why don't you just share a little bit like high overview? Like if someone were to ask you in 30 seconds or less who you are and what you do, what would you say?
Well, I'm Jen Rose. I'm a first name, last name kind of girl. Wellness is incredibly important to me for mental and physical well-being. I came into the work by way of mental health. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Love human behavior, and I love exploring and digging in with people and adventure and busting through fear and limiting beliefs. And I live my life that way, as we'll probably talk about today.
Yeah, you definitely do live your life that way. So oh my gosh, I feel like I don't even know where to begin other than the past year you have recently moved. You decided to move. You weren't, which this is interesting because I feel like as we get older and we're kind of in this state of, I was just at a luncheon and we were just talking about how, as you get older and you get into your like late 30s and 40s and you're kind of figuring out where you want to go next, it's almost like I don't know, we have to like almost create adventures for us because in your 20s and 30s, you have so many different changes, right? You're finding your path, you're finding your career, you're figuring a lot of stuff out. And so a lot of things are new. And then when you get into your 40s, you're like, you've experienced so many things. So now it's like, call it a midlife crisis or a midlife opportunity, however you want to define it. But it's almost like we get into this place where we think, or hey, maybe we want to change career paths, or maybe you decide you want to move to a different city or a different country. Lots of people now are working remote, living in different countries. We have a mutual friend who I actually had on the podcast, Stephanie, who she's decided to go off and live in different countries. But you were like, I want to change. I live in Chicago. I've lived in Chicago forever. And so walk us through kind of what was stirring in your heart over the past, about a year ago, that enticed you to want to kind of make a transition in your life.
Yeah, really good question. So I think if I just backtrack a little bit, the story I've always held is that I used to be this girl who had all these ideas but I never followed through on any of them. And I never felt like I wanted to live the linear life. of go to school, do this, then do this, then do this. And so my heart has always been pulled in directions that I feel like are less than quote unquote the norm. And so when I was back in Chicago, I had previously lived in New York for just outside of New York City for 3 years. I was like, this isn't my place anymore. I felt like in some ways there was more expansion for me and more curiosity that I knew that I needed. And it just wasn't going to happen there. And so I tried it out. I tried it for a year, loved my place. And then, as you know, Kate, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. And so I went on this, I put all my stuff in storage. I don't know how much you want me to get into it right now, of what the year has looked like.
Oh yeah, do it. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be excited and appreciate.
Okay, great. So September 2022, I put all of my stuff in storage and I created a little roadmap for myself. And I'll just emphasize what a big deal this is, because it's easy to get overwhelmed when we don't know the next step. And what I learned, and spoiler alert, is you can only take the next step when the very next step. And so I put all my stuff in storage. I created a map. I did 5 weeks on the road by myself in Airbnbs. I tested out 5 different cities in the Carolinas, and including Nashville and Tennessee. And I went back to Chicago, and that was around Thanksgiving. And I was like, I don't know. I like Charlotte, but I just don't know. And I decided to rent a place in Asheville for 5 weeks. And I loved Asheville. I thought the idea of being in the mountains and sort of like the movie The Holiday with Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet, I was just going to have a little mountain house experience. And I brought my dog, and it was awesome. But I still was like, I don't know which one I want to choose. And I was beating myself up over, how do you not know? How do you not know? You've been to all these cities. And I got to this place of like, what if I never know? What if I never pick anywhere? What if I don't have the clarity? So I went to LA to visit friends, and then I did a training in Boulder. I met some amazing people here in Colorado during that training, went home, had gotten COVID while I was here in Boulder. And I was like, I still don't know. Colorado isn't my place either. And I can't tell you how much angst was in this process, even though it was really exciting at the same time. This idea that I needed to know just was hovering over my head. So I spent some more time in Colorado in April, and went one last time to the Carolinas in July. And I was like, I just need to make a decision. I can't, at that point, the excitement of going from place to place, and it just I was tired of it. And so I found this place on Zillow in Denver, and I thought, there's community there. There are mountains there. If I'm going to move somewhere by myself, it's probably good to know some people versus go to a new city all alone. I'm outdoorsy. I'm active. I'm into spiritual woo-y stuff. And I was like, I love this place. I want it. 75 other applicants, and he picked me. And now I'm in Denver for the last 4 months. And I can't even tell you how happy and how right this choice was for right now for me.
Ooh, oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, I love so much of what you just said, but this choice is right for you right now. That's a really great statement, because I think so often we feel like we want to know what is right for me, period. Not right now. And I feel like that alone is kind of a shift that I've seen in your mindset. Is that something that you kind of discovered over your journey?
Yeah, that there's a time and a place. And, even in my career, when I reflect on it, I started as a social worker. I was doing mental health, went through my own wellness journey, got into the field of wellness and helping people get healthy, loved it, thought, I found my purpose. This is it. I've been doing it now for 12 years. And probably over the last 4, maybe even 5 years, it's like, this isn't the only thing that's it. I've evolved. And so what my purpose is has evolved. And I think that's true in life. We're always evolving, and something is going to feel right in what we need right now, but nothing is permanent. And it doesn't have to be. And we don't need to be married to the idea that, where you live, what your career is, you can always reinvent yourself and explore your curiosities or what you're feeling like you're called to do. I think that's the biggest shift. And when you loosen that grip on this choice, it's permanent, it's forever, it almost traps you in constricting your thought around what's possible and being open to what's going to show up in your life. So, yeah, it's been a huge shift for me.
You work with a lot of different people. I believe you work with quite a few women, like women leaders, women that are professional women. And what when they come to you, what are some of their biggest challenges that they're trying to deal with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, yes, to your point, I see a lot of overachieving, successful women who want to go in, that want to continue to invest in their personal growth and development, their relationships, their careers. And so what I often see as some of the similar patterns is struggle with people pleasing. Yes, they're successful, but there's still this over functioning for other people's needs and feelings. It's sort of a way to take care of others, but in a way that in our society is looked positively upon. Women who maybe struggle with boundaries and taking care of and prioritizing themselves. Women who are maybe afraid to use their voice. Um, and women who just want to feel better, to come back to themselves. They've realized that somewhere along the way they've lost sight of them, their needs, their wants, and have fallen into patterns in their life outside of their careers that just aren't working for them, whether it's related to their health and well-being or their relationships or the relationship with themselves. And so they're coming to discover what's deeper. And often we maybe work on the surface level in the first couple sessions or so around wellness. And then we really get into like the patterning of where they can pivot and where they can build new skills and resource themselves. So does that help to answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. So can we dig into one, and let's talk about an exercise, an activity. If somebody is in this phase where because I think a lot of people are in the phase of something's just missing. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what it is, but I don't know the next step to take because I'm not quite sure what's bothering me, right? Like they're in that state of like, I feel like I'm meant for more, but what does that mean? What does that look like? Is it a move? Is it a career change? Is it, I think some people, what, especially in women, what do they do? Like, oh, I'm going to go cut my bangs or like go do something just like, because we feel like, oh, there's some type of change that is needed. And then you cut the bangs and you're like, oh, wait a second. That wasn't the answer. And so what is an activity? What is something that someone can do right now to kind of self-assess where they are and then figure out what would be a good next step for them?
Oh, that's a really great question. So I think the first part is there's a tool in life coaching, the Wheel of Life, where you look at the different categories of your life and you sort of assess your satisfaction and happiness in your life in that place. So you could start there to just sort of see. But I think most people who are self-aware, and a lot of the people that I work with tend to be self-aware to begin with, have an intuitive sense of what that unsatiable thing is, where they're feeling unfulfilled. So you could start with the wheel, but also just tapping into your intuition. And what I would say is, and Kate, you know this already, action is, so many people are stuck in their head. And so when you're talking to a friend, you're watching a TV show, you're listening to a song, when something gives you that little bit of energy and you're like, ooh, that sounds interesting. That is almost like wooey, the universe dropping you a breadcrumb that is something in you that you might want to discover. So, for example, I have a colleague who is into poetry, and I just learned this about them. And that was like, oh, that's so fun. I used to write as well a long time ago. So I've been writing more, I've been creating more poetry, but I wouldn't have thought of that on my own. And so I think the key is to listen to the little whispers of the universe around you, the people, the things that you see, and notice if you get a spark of light and then following through on that thing. So I have an interest in doing pottery. So looking up a place that I could take pottery classes, because anytime we do something new and we get into action, it's really energizing and it gives us information. So that's where I would start as just like one example. But when you're doing
Yeah.
coaching, it's very collaborative and I don't ever impose an idea on anyone, but that would be like a place that might invite someone to entertain as how they would discover this next step and what would fulfill and feed their soul.
Yeah. What, and I love that you're talking my language with the creative pursuits. Of course, like we have to tap into those creative pursuits that we love in order for us to really feel that energy and that joy. You mentioned very successful, high achieving women who I see this term now where it's or when people talk about that high functioning anxiety, like people that like are so. I've seen some videos of some people that are talking through this, which it makes total sense, but I'd never like heard it be like talked about in certain ways. And so, what do you feel like? Because I feel like that's very relatable to so many women is this idea of, oh, that's just life, like it's just we're supposed to just feel anxious all the time, like that's just how we're supposed to feel and just kind of get over it, and so we don't really do anything to kind of I guess manage those emotions a little bit better. So what are your thoughts when someone comes to you and you can kind of just feel like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of anxiety there, which might be causing them to either not pursue some of the things that they really want to, or like you said, get stuck in our heads. That can be like the most challenging thing is like you're just over and over with the thoughts continuously. So how do you support people in that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So at a high level, part of where I think that anxiety stems from, and in particular with women, is just how our like patriarchal society has been, and this pressure for women to prove, and this pressure for women to feel enough. And I think that drives some of that anxiety around success. And so I think one of the ways that we address it is again coming back to what are my needs, what are my wants, what are my desires, coming back to self and addressing what those limiting beliefs are and where are those stories coming from. And if we can poke holes in those stories, if we can reframe those stories, then the anxiety doesn't have to be so high, the threshold doesn't have to be so high, and we can quiet some of that noise. And the other thing that I see because of this feeling of not enoughness or maybe not worthy, even though they are successful, that there can be a lack of self compassion. Compassion can be maybe experienced as a weakness. Being gentle with yourself can maybe be experienced as a weakness. And if I start to be gentle with myself, have compassion with myself, then I will, in some ways, resign and I won't achieve the things that I want to achieve. And so it's softening in to how compassion really supports and self love really supports our mental well being and our what we can achieve and our potential. What do you think?
So, well, no, as you're talking, I'm thinking about it for in even in your perspective of kind of the transition that you made and that feeling of just not knowing what's coming next. I feel like obviously we get a lot of anxiety around the we don't know what the next step, where it's going to lead us, where it's going to take us. Is it the right thing? And all of that stuff. And so to throw everything in your car and to say, I'm just going to, go from place to place for a little while and then see what happens and see where I show up. It sounds great. And obviously now you can say, because you're in Colorado, you're there and you're like, I've done it. I've done that. But while you were doing it, what was that like? Like, what was that sense of, I mean, were you scared doing that? What did that feel like? And how did you kind of, what skills were you able to gain going through that experience that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Yeah, that's a good question too. You're always good with questions. You're stealing my job. You know, it's interesting. I feel like I inherently, in some way, have a lot of courage and bravery. And I feel like I've lived my life. I've gotten feedback that, oh my gosh, how could you do that? That's so scary. There are a lot more scary things to me than being on the road, exploring different cities. Somehow there's a safety and a confidence that I have in myself and my ability to resource myself and my resilience. Um, it's funny, Kate, like people will say, I'm a big foodie. Every city that I went to, I created a Google list in my phone that's on Google Maps of all the restaurants that I wanted to try and the different fitness studios that were in that city. And um and then I would just go and I would sit at the bar because I wanted to have the experience and check that restaurant out. And then I'd end up talking to people. And that's unique, I think, to me. There are other people that are like that too. And then I have clients and other people like, oh my gosh, I would never go out and eat by myself. I would never go sit at a bar by myself. And so that wasn't scary to me. Making a choice was scary to me. Committing to something felt scary to me.
Mm.
Being on an adventure, exploring. And it's interesting, actually. When I got back to Chicago in the summer, there was a night I didn't have any friends that were around to do anything with. But the thought of sitting at a bar in my own hometown by myself, that felt scary. That felt vulnerable. That felt intimidating. So that could be a whole other conversation about how we show up in front of strangers and how we can maybe be more vulnerable sometimes. Some people can than when they're with their closest, most intimate, high stakes relationships. But
Oh yeah, I do feel like that's like a whole other conversation to have, because think about how many people, there's people, I'm like, I was standing in line with this woman and she was telling me about her an affair that someone was having, or even on, I am shocked. I mean, not so much anymore, but when TikTok first came out, I'm like, look, these people are sharing their deepest, darkest experiences and secrets and things to, like, not strangers, but strangers, really. And I'm like, wow, people are, it's crazy what people will share with a stranger. And then the person sitting next to them is like, I never even knew you had that dream, or I never even knew that that was something you're interested in. But so that doesn't surprise me at all that you felt comfortable doing that at another city versus in your hometown. In your hometown, someone might walk in, maybe you see an ex, or all the things that like pop up in our mind of what could happen. But if you're in a different city, you're like, hey, no one knows me. I could be anyone.
exactly. It's fun. And I'm extroverted, so I chat people up. You get to hear people's stories. I had some really amazing, deep conversations. You know that I'm allergic to small talk. So we would just go in. And was it scary? I mean, no, but in some sense, it's really exhilarating to connect with people. But that's unique to me. There are lots of people who are more introverted, who don't need and feed off of that connection. It doesn't really fill their soul. I will tell you, probably the scariest thing was I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that was my last stop. And was it my brake light? I think it was my brake light on my car came on, and I was supposed to drive like 14 hours back to Chicago. And that freaked me out because I was like,
Mm.
how am I going to go get this fixed? I'm going to be driving X amount of miles. I think I was exhausted at that point and I was in tears. That was scary. But the going to the places, once I figured it out and had a sense and had my map and knew where I was going and whatnot, that didn't feel scary to me. Making the decision and committing felt scary to me until I realized it doesn't have to be permanent and it's just money and, just a greater trust for something bigger than me.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Yeah, there's this in one of the sessions for our Dream Manager program, we ask about um there's a part when we're talking about stillness and silence, and people are so uncomfortable with that, and one of the, and being able to like be alone, like actually like sit by yourself. And there is an exercise that or the our dreamers are encouraged to decide to do something, and one of those things is eating out at a restaurant by yourself, because most people have not done that. They haven't experienced that. And so it does make people feel uncomfortable. But it's funny because there are some people that we work with that they say they're going to do it and they do it, and it's experience. And some of them are fine with it. Some of them hated it. Some of them were like, oh, I would totally do it again. And then some of them, they come back to their session. They're like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And then it's like, okay, well, all right, well, dude, now you have to do it within the next month. And they come back and they're like, I almost did it. And then they come back and they're like, okay, I did it. And I hated every second of it. So it's so interesting. But I love that you shared the decision was a challenge, because I think, that's once you make the decision and commit to doing it, that's the first step, right? Like that is the first step that we can take.
Can I
So what's next? Oh,
wait,
go
I
ahead.
interrupt you on that because I want to tell you like what was really happening for me before I made the decision. I was struggling with an extreme amount of anxiety from mid-April until I made the decision. The literally waking up, Kate, with tightness in my throat, in my chest, and it wouldn't go. I was crying all the time. I was meditating. I was working out. I was doing my own inner work, journaling. It wouldn't go away. I didn't know why. I got off coffee. I don't really drink alcohol. I found this house. I decided this is the place I wanted to be. The second that I got this place that I'm now living in, the anxiety went away the next day completely.
Really?
So there's something about wrestling with something and being in the in between that actually creates more suffering than the committing and making the decision itself and being past it.
Yeah.
It was like magic. I could not believe it. I could not believe that the second that I made the decision, and I have struggled with my mental health on and off, but never in a way where it interrupted my functioning. And it didn't necessarily interrupt my functioning. I was going and seeing clients and everything like that and still working out, but it was so bad. But the second that I made the decision, I mean, I can't tell you what a miracle that was. And so if anyone who's listening to this is feeling like they're in this in between and it's creating a lot of stress, yes, try to make the most informed, most intuitive, most appropriate decision for you, but make a decision, and
Yeah.
that suffering will go away. You get to move forward. You stop being paralyzed.
There is this quote by Matthew Kelly that I love, and I'm gonna have to find it and put it in the comments, but because it talks about how there's nothing being even like something about we have to be 100% committed. Once we are, like, we are fine. Like even just that 1% of like on the line causes so much frustration, because it helps us to get out of our head. My dad always used to say, whenever I was kind of like feeling frustrated or didn't really know which direction to take or whatever, and I'd talk to him, and or if I made a decision and then what happens, right? Like we either have to make the decision, then we make the decision, and then you can't go back and think, well, what if, or I should have done. No, he always reminded me of like, you have to decide, you have to pick one direction, and then don't look back. Then all you do is move forward, and then you have to take everything that you've learned and then continue to move forward. And so I think it's such a reminder. I always remind myself of that whenever I'm making a decision too. It's like decisions like you said, it's almost like so many of the decisions that we make, they're not final. Like you can choose to move again. You can choose, like there's everything that like there's very few decisions that are like we wouldn't be able to fix somehow, some way. I mean, it might not, some are more uncomfortable to fix maybe than others, or a little bit more challenging, but so what is what's next for you? What's like the next kind of hurdle or journey that you're working on?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm always working on something, Kate.
Of course.
I'm always working on something. Right now, it is this transition and really building community and really expanding my practice, who I serve, how deep I go with people. That's really, really important to me. So, in conjunction with working with new clients, working on myself, going deeper with myself so that I can bring clients deeper and have more transformative experiences and results with them. Because at the end of the day, I think so many people are walking around dissociated, not in their bodies. So for me, it's coming home to doing everything that I do with my clients. You know, I'm going to be a step ahead, but it's developing my relationship with myself and helping other people develop the relationship with themselves and really establishing a solid foundation of knowing who you actually are, what your needs are, how to communicate those needs. And I'm doing the work too, and just living my life, going on the mountains, going to breathwork things.
I love it.
All the things, Kate, always working on something.
That's so cool. Well, where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best. And my Instagram is at @the.jen with one N, JEN .rose, like the flower.
All right. Awesome. Well, Jen, it was so wonderful to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey. I know that somebody needed to hear this, and hey, maybe someone will end up in Arizona or California or somewhere else in the world that they are not currently living. So, thank you for being you.
Thank you for having me, Kate. It's so good to see you.
You too. All right. And until next time, go create something.